Hi, I'm Quatsi,
And I'm Lucretia.
and welcome to the next episode of The Woke and Wealthy Coach. We're excited to be back with you today, and today we're going to talk about a couple of interesting things. We're going to discuss the next chapter in the drama that is the U.S. 2020 general election, and we'll also start to talk about some implications uh, of things that you need to look for going forward as it pertains to the racial wealth gap in America. And as we said, we've been building you up to really teaching you how to play the game at the next level. And so, very much the way a sports team or a sports coach would do, we have started out talking about the game, talking about the purpose of the game, the rules of the game, and how those rules are changing with this 2020 general election. And so we're going to talk some more about these rules and how certain factions have really been attempting to move the goalposts, quite frankly, um, in a way that potentially could make it harder for us as people of color to play. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to motivate you for some of the conversations we're having in the coming weeks with you associated with wealth, professional development, and wealth building, um, and really just kind of set you up for those conversations. But for now, Lucretia, why don't you kind of set up the conversation around this next phase of the 2020 general election and what's been happening?
Well, last time we talked about the fact that the Electoral College had voted, indeed voted, and the next step in the process would be for those votes to be certified.
Mm-hmm.
And so Congress and the Senate, they were in session to count those votes and to certify those votes to officially name Joe Biden as the president elect.
Mm-hmm.
Up to this point, as we mentioned in the prior videos, there have been numerous lawsuits from the existing administration citing voter fraud,
Mm-hmm.
citing unconstitutional practices, citing errors in the state's processes, all of which were pretty much shot down. I don't think a single one was heard, a single argument was truly heard in the sense of a hearing, as it were. So they just didn't have the credence, did not have the weight that they needed to have. Meanwhile, the Republican Party has continued the Stop the Steal campaign. And as a result, when January 6th, the morning of January 6th, we all saw what happened. Congress was busy taking care of their business.
Mm-hmm.
There was a separate rally that was held by the president and his support personnel, or the group that was there to rally. And while I 100% agree in the right to protest, the right to rally, this one is very sensitive simply because we have an outgoing president leaving office, who doesn't necessarily agree with the results that came in from the 50 states.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, there's been this Stop the Steal campaign. Much tension has been rising in this group. And it led to, I'm going to call it an insurrection
It's not somewhat, it was an insurrection by every definition.
at the U.S. Capitol. It was an atrocity of an event. There were several things we can unpack about it, and several people have talked about it. But because we really focus on issues around the Black community, I do feel like law enforcement had a very different approach to this crowd than what they did with Black Lives Matter and other protests we've seen in the past. And it made for a very easy break in of the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
That particular incident not only wounded many, but it left several people dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, Lucretia, you said it very well. It was an insurrection, and let's talk about this because one of the other things that's been frying my noodle a little bit is how people are comparing this event to Black Lives Matter protests, and I think there are a couple of things that are very, very different that we all need to talk about and we need to own. First off, let's talk about the dictionary definition of insurrection. Oxford Dictionary defines insurrection as a violent uprising against an authority or government. Now, let's talk about this, right? People talk about they've referred to a lot of these insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol on Wednesday as patriots. Well, patriots relative to what? Relative to whom? Even when the American Revolution was fought, the colonies launched an insurrection against the legal government at the time, which was the Commonwealth of England.
King
Okay,
George.
and King George. Now, obviously, they had good reason to do that, but let's call it what it was. That was an insurrection. It was a rebellion relative to the laws of the king. That was treason. What was done at the Capitol on Wednesday was an insurrection. It was, by all definitions, an act of domestic terrorism. It was a violent uprising against the legitimate government. And here's something that's key, because if you want to talk about Black Lives Matter, let's talk about Black Lives Matter. Now, at its core, the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, it was about what? It was about, and it was formed around the prevalence, the verifiable fact of disproportionate amount of police violence, lethal police violence against Black people, and especially the large number of unarmed Black people that have been killed at the hands of police. Hence the terms Black Lives Matter, Our Lives Matter. Now, there have been demonstrations, there have been marches, there have been protests, and at many of these demonstrations, there have been acts of violence. There have been general, disregard for the laws of the land. Not all of them, and they were not all committed by the people who are proper parts of that movement. But those things have happened. But at the end of the day, that movement is aimed at reducing the acts of violence by police against Black people. Now, let's look at what happened on Wednesday at the Capitol. First and foremost, the objective and the narrative around which that insurrection was launched was around overturning the results of a lawfully conducted election in the United States of America according to the guidelines and the precepts of the Constitution of the United States.
That's true.
It was basically about a group of people who did not get their way in the 2020 general election, starting with the President of the United States, Donald John Trump. He didn't get his way. And so as a result of not getting his way, he said, well, the game's not fair. I mean, that really sounds like, infantile, childish stuff that happens on the playground.
If you step back and think about the psychological thought process behind that, these are people who are used to winning all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when they don't win, then they launch an attack on the very system that is really enabling the thing which they are against to move forward.
A violent attack at that. They're used to winning, and there's a sense of entitlement that has gone along with that. And when we talk about the racial wealth gap, it's going to really drive home the point about this sense of entitlement. And so basically, the first thing that happened was, you know, President Trump didn't win the election. And in fact, even before the election, he went on record as saying, if I lose, then that means it's rigged.
And that I asked the question prior to the election, would you agree to a peaceful transition of power?
And his response was, we'll see. Right?
So it seems as if you unpack everything leading up to it, the behaviors, failure was not an option.
Right, right. And so you can't compare Black Lives Matter to what happened on Wednesday, on the 6th, because what happened on Wednesday was literally about a rebellion against the lawful execution of a general election that didn't go the way a lot of people wanted it to go, versus a movement and an uprising, if you will, against unjustified police violence, lethal police violence against an oppressed people. You can't conflate the two issues at all. And then you have to ask yourself the question on this subject of entitlement: why is it that so many people are willing to believe the lie? And here's what I mean by that. The whole premise is that the election was stolen from Trump and the Trump supporters. Well, every state that has been contested has conducted no less than 3 recounts.
Mm-hmm.
The Constitution says that each state can determine how their elections are held.
That's their right.
That is their right according to the Constitution. I said last time that there's so many people that want to take action in the name of the Constitution, but they haven't read the Constitution. We've read it. The Constitution guarantees the states the right to conduct their elections, to select their electors.
Then you have to look at the state legislation
Yes.
to see what the guidance is around election, because it does reside in the states. It doesn't reside, even the federal, the states have some authority in the federal elections.
And even in the contested states, right? Many of those states, they were run by Republican governors. They were executed by Republican secretaries of state, who are generally the office that's responsible for holding the election. Not in all cases, but in many of those cases, Georgia being a notable one. And so, again, you have every one of those states, they've gone through multiple recounts, including recounts by hand, as is their right to do under the Constitution. The opposing side, in this case, President Trump, they had a window of time where they are guaranteed an opportunity to challenge the results. They challenged the results, first resulting in recounts. Then they challenged the issues that they had in terms of whether there was fraud, how much fraud there was, whether the states obeyed their own constitutional laws. They challenged those in state courts. Those suits were thrown out, not by a slim margin, but they were thrown out by the state Supreme Courts where they went to. They were challenged in federal court. Those cases were thrown out. Why? For lack of evidence. And on many of those federal courts where the cases were thrown out, they were run by judges, conservative judges appointed by this president. This president has appointed over 200 federal judges during his term. And then it even went to the United States Supreme Court, where, oh, by the way, there is a majority on that court because this president has actually had the opportunity to select multiple Supreme Court justices. So there is a conservative majority on the court, and the Supreme Court threw the thing out. So you have a situation where all of these conservative institutions, many of whom have been directly appointed by President Trump on the basis of the evidence and the basis of constitutional law, have thrown out these challenges. And yet, you have this group of people culminating in this group of mainly white men and women who violently stormed the Capitol to interrupt specifically a constitutionally mandated duty by the Congress in which um, 4 people were killed and 1 person was killed by police.
Interesting thing, the very people who were saying Blue Lives Matter were out there attacking Blue Lives to get to the Capitol.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you just said something right there.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the people who died in this uprising, one of the protesters died, and we're going to get on that in a minute. One of the protesters died. Other people who died in that uprising were law enforcement, Blue Lives.
So if Blue Lives really matter, then you know, we often get the question when there's an African American that's you know looking for justice, trying to find justice in the system. Well, what did he do? What did she do? Well, maybe they should have done this, or maybe they should have done that. Oh, the cops are good. Oh, the cops are great. I love cops. No, they don't.
No,
No, they don't.
they love their entitlement and their position of privilege.
And what I'll say is what we have watched is a rabbit trail. We have watched a have you ever played that? Remember the little game? It was like a video game back in the day, and it was a ball. Pinball? Was it
Mm-hmm.
pinball? And we would play pinball, and we'd watch the ball go back and forth
Mm-hmm.
all around the board, all around the game. I forget what those games. I guess they were called video games back then. I can't remember what they were.
Well,
But
real pinball. It wasn't a video game. It was an arcade game. I think I
arcade
forget
game,
what they
thank you.
arcade game.
And so that ball would go
Our age
all
is
around. So
showing.
we have watched throughout this administration, whoever the target is, the ants run to. They just find the sugar trail, follow the sugar trail to the target. And there have been a number of targets in this whole administration for the last 4 years. There's not been a lot of loyalty, but anyone who speaks against what the president wants tends to then sometimes become a
They
target.
become a target, including his most loyal lieutenant, Vice President Mike Pence. As soon as we get to a point where that person does something different than what the president wants, the president turns on them like they're a staunch enemy.
And so that gets me to the question. That's why I was setting this up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many are calling for impeachment. Of course, there was still the option of, invoking, having him removed.
Mm-hmm.
We're sitting on, what are we, January 9th, 10th today?
10th, yep.
And there are 10 more days until inauguration.
Yep.
The president came out, I think, a day, 30 hours after the attack on the Capitol and said he wants to work a peaceful transition. Now he's recanted that, but he wants a peaceful transition and has also encouraged everyone to calm down. Why do you think he did that? Do you think he's really about the peaceful transition, or was that really just something that he was coerced in doing?
I would speculate that the president is now rightfully thinking about the legal ramifications of what he's done. Um, there is evidence to support charges of sedition, or even, reckless inciting of conduct that results in felony death. There are a lot of laws that prescribe penalties and punishments for people who do what the president and some of his supporters have done. And he's not going to be in office in just a couple of weeks. And there are other states in this country. The state of New York. The New York District Attorney is sitting on um, is sitting on charges that they're considering bringing against the president, which they have chosen not to, while he has the power of this Republican-controlled Senate to protect him from conviction under impeachment. And so I think the president is thinking about his legal future. And and also, you have to ask yourself the question, in spite of the overwhelming evidence that this election was conducted at least as fairly as any of the recent past elections, um, why is it that so many of these people were so passionate to believe the lie to the degree that they became violent? What do you say about that?
For the same reason that they don't believe that it was an insurrection,
Mm-hmm.
for the same reasons that they're more upset with the fact that his Twitter account and his Facebook accounts have been suspended than they are about the damage that was done on January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is absolutely deplorable to see some of the comments I'm seeing
Mm-hmm.
on social media around the fact that they are blaming Black Lives Matter, and Antifa and protesters for what happened on January 6th when it was very clear that these people gathered around the president for a rally
Mm-hmm.
in Washington, and he then gave them the green light to charge the hills,
Mm-hmm.
to go to the Capitol and protest, which is okay to go to the Capitol and protest. He also sprinkled some additional firewords in his charge that I don't want to go into,
Mm-hmm.
but even he I would say he's an expert at
Gaslighting.
gaslighting. That's a at gaslighting and yeah, lighting the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he came out to apologize to the, not really apologize, but to address the American people around what had happened and encourage peace in the land. What did he say about the Trump campaign at the end of that statement?
He said, I know how you feel. I feel the same way because this election was stolen from us. But calm down, go home. I love you. You're very special.
But on the one that even the one that he made when it was after the Capitol, um, the third, yeah,
That was
the
the one he made that day. But
yeah,
yeah,
but there was one that he when he talked about he's going to commit to a peaceful protest.
peaceful transition.
Yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. A peaceful transition. He said our work is not done.
Yeah, yeah.
Our campaigning and our fighting is not done.
And basically, all this amounts to um, sore losers trying to change the rules of the game. And the degree of hypocrisy and entitlement associated with this is mind-blowing because these are the very institutions which have taken so much from blacks and other minorities that are, underserved, under empowered. Um, you know, a lot of conservative ideology breaks up the economic equation by putting people in two categories. They're makers or takers, right? And the idea being makers are, hardworking, God-fearing Americans who, produce and they're the engine of our economy. They are small business owners, what the Republican Party tends to like to call job creators, which is a euphemism for, rich people who may have their own businesses or finance,
Mm-hmm.
businesses. Um, and again, I don't have a problem with rich people who own their own businesses. You're looking at a couple, but it's amazing that they group the rest of everybody into this category called takers when you know the institutions from slavery to today have been the greatest taker institutions, in this country. And so here it is, as we have, fought hard to win the game. And again, this is a game that has been rigged. President Trump was right about something. This game is rigged, but not in the way that he advertises. You have phenomena like gerrymandering, which have been specifically designed to divide up the voting, to dilute
Suppress
the
the minority
voting
vote.
power of minorities and other groups. Um, and even in spite of all of those rules of the game, the Democratic Party won. Um, the Senate races in Georgia, which were incredible. I mean, won by a razor thin margin, where Senator-elect Warnock and Senator-elect Ossoff, um, two Democratic senators, are now going to be seated in the U.S. Congress, and this is huge.
This is very huge, and I think from a social perspective, when you look at Georgia, Georgia is the state to which was named after King George.
Mm-hmm.
That America, or before it was the America, it was the colonies that rebelled against that particular king for the freedom of America. And so I just see a whole lot of what would you call it? Uh,
Prophetic
yeah, I
manifestation.
was trying to use a different word, but I symbolism I think is probably what it.
Symbolism,
Uh,
karma,
yeah, there
a
you
whole
go.
lot of karma.
I was looking for something more like that, but there's a
uh,
whole lot of just karma that's
mm-hmm.
associated with what's happening. We've got two senators, a black senator, senators elect, an African American, and a Jewish senator, both which represent um,
Two oppressed people.
oppression
Mm-hmm.
and social challenge, right? As it were.
Mm-hmm.
Warnock coming out of the very church in which Martin Luther King was the pastor of
Yeah,
in his days, which
Ebenezer Baptist.
is not lost on me. In the state of Georgia, which is a home state also of Representative John Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And so Georgia has been so instrumental in this hour in this period. Let we need to keep our eyes on Georgia
Mm-hmm.
and what's happening in Georgia, because Georgia was not only blue in the recounts, but Georgia turned around and was blue again
Yeah.
in the Senate race. And President Trump came down to help with the campaign of the two people who are running against Warnock and Ossoff, and it just did not tip a victory for
No,
him.
in fact, he really hurt them with that bullying call that you'll recall. He made a call to the Secretary of State, and this is after they filed a lawsuit. The Trump campaign filed a lawsuit against the state of Georgia, challenging the results of their election for the president. And so, many of you can go to the news clips of that time and look at that challenge. But here is how important it is that Senator Warnock, Senator-elect Warnock, and Senator-elect Ossoff have been elected. Um, you may recall in 2010, in the midterm elections of 2010, the Democrats wholesale lost the Senate and the House of Representatives. And so President Obama's legislative agenda came to a grinding halt. He could hardly get anything done. In the elections of 2012, the Democrats won back the House, but failed to retake the Senate. And so, for a law to be passed, it has to get approval by the House of Representatives and approval by the Senate. And if either body does not approve, that law won't be passed unless there is a large majority to override, if you will, the blockage. Um, and so since 2010, um, the Republican Party has held the Senate, which has meant that any Democratic president or Democratic initiative has had a difficult time getting through the Senate. Even the nominations to the Supreme Court or nominations for the president's cabinet. Now, going into this runoff, the Republicans had, I want to say it was 50 seats in the Senate, and the Democrats had 48.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of the election of Senator-elect Warnock and Ossoff, There is now a 50-50 split in the Senate. 50 Republican seats, 50 Senate seats. Per the Constitution, the vice president serves as what's called the president of the Senate. They're responsible for managing Senate business, conducting certain meetings, and overall leadership of the Senate. So if there is ever a split, a tie, if you will, where there's a 50-50 split in the Senate, the vice president, in this case, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, who serves as the president of the Senate, they cast the tie-breaking vote. So because of the elections that occurred in Georgia, the Republicans have now officially lost their majority or lost their power to completely block legislation as a result of Democratic initiatives, because you essentially have 50 Democratic votes in the Senate plus Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. And so that has huge, huge implications to the grip of the Republican Party on power of the Congress. So now the Democrats control the House. They now fundamentally control the Senate. And then we have a Democratic president. So the Republican parties, and again, we're not against Republicans. We're not against Democrats. We're not for Republicans. We're not for Democrats. We are independents. And there's a lot of people we know, say, well, whose party are we on? We're on the Lord's party. But just speaking factually, the grip that the Republican Party has had on the legislative agenda for the last 10 years has now officially been broken. And that is one of many things that people are fighting about.
And I think that's a huge win for America. Mitch McConnell, we've ditched Mitch, as some would say. But Mitch McConnell will, I think, roll back to his Senate seat. He'll no longer be the speaker.
Or the majority. Well,
the majority speaker,
or
right?
the majority leader. He's still the
he's still the senator,
the party leader in the Senate.
So he'll be the minority leader, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
For the Senate. So under his leadership, we watched a lot of interesting behavior, games being played, and now we have to learn the strategies of the new leader, Chuck Schumer. So we'll have to watch him, watch his behaviors, watch ways in which he leads the Senate to victory in whatever it is that he has on his agenda. So I think we have to just keep our eyes open, watch and learn, and see what he allows to come to the floor, what comes from Congress, and go from there. You mentioned earlier, I just want to say this. What is you're from Georgia, so what is one of the most important things in terms of fruit and vegetable in Georgia?
Peach.
The peach.
Georgia peaches.
Yeah. And so now the subject of impeachment is back. All of us. I know that was
more karma.
Yeah. So the subject of impeachment has arisen because of what happened on January 6th. So guys, all of this stuff is these are interesting nuggets for you to think about. At the end of the day, one of the things that I look at is, I think of that slogan, "Make America Great Again," and I think I saw a Facebook or an Instagram post that we might have a chance at making America great now.
Well, one of the things we want to do is to kind of set up the next set of conversations that we're going to have. And as I said, really this whole debate and this whole discussion about the election being stolen, it's about sore losers trying to change the rules of the game, trying to move the goalposts. Before we leave this topic, one of the things I want to encourage each and every one of you to do, the news outlets today have a list of GOP senators, of Republican senators, and members of the House of Representatives who supported the challenge of the Electoral College votes from these key battleground states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, etc. These are individuals who knew absolutely what they were doing, that there was no evidence of widespread fraud, that the suits, the Trump campaign and others filed some 60 plus lawsuits in the various courts. They were all thrown out. Um, these people knew what they were doing, and they were pulling political stunts, or, God forbid, trying to nullify your votes, the will of you and others. You need to know who they are. We're not going to call their names out right now. You do that research on your own.
Especially if you're in a state in which there's a vote coming up soon, you may have the power to make a change.
Yeah. And it goes back to what we said before. You need to be concerned about more than just the general election, more than just the presidential election, because so many of the actors and agents that were instrumental in this particular drama were elected at the state level. So you need to know who these people are, and you need to know um, where they get their power from and how
I
to make your voice known.
Yeah, I think we're in an age now where the middle is becoming more and more powerful.
Mhm.
So those of us who've had to make the choice of right and left in the future, I hope that we have a more viable option for those of us who actually want to listen to and weigh all the issues and make a decision on whether or not it is the right thing to exit or to move forward. I mean, after all, that's what we're here for. We're not here to ride the bus just because we're Republican or just because we're Democrat. We
Mhm.
are here to really help our country move forward in a productive way. So I don't know, is this the end of the two-party system as we know it?
I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think one thing's for sure: things are definitely going to be changing, and you all need to remain vigilant. This whole issue isn't going to just go away when President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris uh, take their offices. At the core, there are a lot of people that we see every day, people we go to work with, people we call friends, people we go to church with, who fundamentally believe that um, this country is turning into a socialist republic. And many of them don't even know what real socialism is,
They don't.
and believe that you know they need to oppose what's happening. And so I wish there would be no more violence, but I'm afraid that there are a lot of people who feel that additional violence is called for. And so be prayerful, be mindful, be very vigilant.
One other thing I will say, we're seeing tech become more and more important in government.
Mm-hmm,
And perhaps traditional ways of which security and investigation was done did not involve tech in the way that we need it now.
mm-hmm,
Um, People send emails, people make posts, people are doing most things digitally. So cybersecurity
mm-hmm,
and security to support the U.S. government has ramped up in a lot of big ways.
mm-hmm,
And it's no secret that Twitter shut down President Trump's account.
mm-hmm,
It's no secret that Facebook did. It didn't happen by happenstance that Amazon is canceling its subscription with Parler. Parler is a conservative social media outlet, kind of like a Facebook. I set up an account on Parler just so I could get familiar with the platform and see what's going on. But it's definitely a right wing, far right wing app or
yeah,
platform.
yeah. So, having said all of that, the next thing for us to look for is President-elect Biden's inauguration, which is going to be happening here in just under 2 weeks.
But you will
And
historic. It won't look like other inaugurations since
no, it
we're
won't.
on quarantine. Folks are concerned about the virus. We've just had this attack at the Capitol, so we'll see what happens there. But we'll all be plugged in digitally. But pray for the country.
Yeah, definitely pray for the country. And next time, we're going to start to talk about wealth and the racial wealth gap, and start to begin the discussion on wealth building strategies. But in the meantime, Let's look forward to the inauguration of a new president. And again, we thank you for your time, players. We're glad that you're on the team. And remember, our message is relevant.
Our message is woke.
And our message will definitely help to empower you. See you next time.
And don't forget to hit like and subscribe.
Absolutely. And hit that notification bell so that you get notified whenever new episodes come out. Thank you. We'll see you next time.